Shalom, Erev Tov. That's good evening, students. I hope all of you are doing well. Um, in this lecture is going to be a little bit longer than the others. The lectures are going to feel a little bit differently going henceforth. The first couple of weeks are really about accomplishing just a small number of goals, but those goals are actually quite difficult. The first goal is that you would know the alphabet, both in terms of the consonants and also in terms of the vowels. And the second goal is that you would begin reading more fluidly. And when I say reading, what I mean is that you're able to look at a set of words and pronounce them properly, more or less. There are little exceptions here and there that we touch on, but that you're more or less able to look at a word written in Hebrew and pronounce it. And so some of you have remarked that you said, well, it looks like in your lectures in these first couple weeks, like you've sort of been teaching toward the quiz or teaching toward the test, and that is absolutely right to a certain degree. Not just because I want you to sort of do well on tests, no, but rather because those tests are specifically designed to get you reading as quickly as possible. And so from my perspective, if you are able, the quizzes are a really good measurement for me to be able to tell if you are able to move on to the next step, which is what we're doing now. And already, and you all are doing a good job, but already in chapter 4, you are reading sentences in Hebrew, not these silly kind of sentences where it says, Sally told Fred to whatever, who knows. But real Hebrew sentences that say things like David stood, or Amad David, or Abraham stood, Avraham Amad. You're able now to look at those and tell the difference. I mean, think about this. Most of you now are at a point where you can read those Hebrew words and tell the difference between a subject and a verb. Okay? That's a really big deal. Just think back 2 weeks ago. How many of you would have been able, first of all, even to pronounce and make the sounds in Hebrew, much more, much less look at a very simple sentence and be able to tell that's a subject, that's a verb. Most of you could not do that 2 weeks ago. And so give yourself a little bit of credit that you have made it a significant distance into this course, and that is really, really good. So, whoops, sorry. That's really impressive. So good job to all of you. In this lecture, we're going to focus on chapters 5 and 6. And you can open to those chapters, but the titles are Nouns and Verbs, Feminine. That's chapter 5. We've already worked with masculine verbs. And then nouns and verb plural. So, as a reminder, Hebrew has two genders, right? In some, like in German, we have masculine, feminine, and neutrum, neuter. In other languages, you have similarly masculine, feminine, and neuter. In other languages, there's no gender, but in Hebrew, we have masculine and feminine. And so we're going to be working with, what are some of the distinctive characteristics of feminine nouns, and then what are some of the distinct characteristics of plural nouns, masculine and feminine. So that's really what we're working on. Here are some focus questions. Now that I know how to recognize a masculine singular noun, how do I recognize a feminine one? How do I recognize masculine and feminine plural nouns, because they will be different? Thirdly, how do I tell the difference between a masculine singular verb and a feminine singular verb? And how do I recognize the third person common plural of perfect verbs? Now, there's some grammatical language in here that may be a little bit strange, like common. You say, well, what on earth does that mean? We'll get to that in just a little bit. So don't feel too overwhelmed by some of this in case it feels a bit over, maybe it's been a little bit of time since you've been in a grammar class. So don't freak out too soon. We will get there. So just as a reminder, look at point 2. All the nouns that we've learned so far have been masculine nouns. So one of the most common nouns that we've been encountering is this one. Let's see, where's my little cursor? There it is. Melech. And just as a reminder, you're not going to be tested on this, but when you see these 3 dots, this is an E-class vowel called a segol, and when you see them paired up like this, one here under the first letter, one here under the second, it changes the pronunciation a bit. That pushes the accent away from the end to the front. So this is pronounced melech as opposed to melech, right? Most Hebrew words that we're reading are going to have their accent on the last syllable. So just something to keep in mind. Again, you're not going to be tested on that. I just want you, we'll keep practicing and drilling with it until it becomes second nature, which it will. So we do require subject-verb agreement when it comes to these nouns, and so we'll need to just kind of keep our eyes open for that. And then, but that's something we already know, right? That's what this part is about. Is you all already know that needs to match up. That the subject of the verb needs to match the verb from a grammatical gender perspective. What's the fourth thing we know? Hebrew nouns can take the definite article, that is the. So, for instance, test yourself here. Let's look at the word melech. That's indefinite, so it means a king. What would it look like if you had the word, what if you wanted to say the king? Try it, just think about it for a second. What would that word look like if you wanted it to say the king? What would it look like in Hebrew? Okay? If you don't remember, you can go back to page 28 where it says ha-melech. That's the difference. The definite article is the ha plus the dagesh in the first consonant. So go back to page 28 if none of that makes sense to you. If you don't know how to identify a Hebrew noun, a definite Hebrew noun that is a Hebrew noun that is the thing as opposed to simply a thing, if it's a thing, then it's indefinite. If it's the, then it is definite. That language definite can be a little bit confusing. Think about it this way. When we put the in front of something, we are speaking about a definite item or person. The professor, the book. And indefinite means we don't have a particular one defined or a particular one in mind. So that's the definite article. And then, so it's actually pretty impressive, right? When you think about it, 2 weeks ago, most of you, if not all of you, did not know any of these things about Hebrew. Now all of you have some sense of, probably all of you know all four of these things. And others of you are pretty close. So that's all very impressive. Pat yourselves on the back and move on. What will we learn about nouns in this lesson? We will learn about feminine nouns and how they differ from masculine nouns. We're going to talk about general rules. There are going to be exceptions, okay? Let me just put that out there. With languages, if you've ever learned foreign languages, you know that in almost every language, you're going to learn a rule and there will be exceptions to it. That's just the reality of language in the world. So we're going to learn about feminine nouns and how they differ from masculine nouns in general ways, right? To help you kind of wade into the water, recognizing that there will be exceptions. Secondly, we will learn about the typical characteristics of feminine nouns. So again, these are not always followed by the language, and so there's going to be variation there. We're going to learn about typical characteristics. Finally, we will learn about masculine and feminine plural nouns. So how do you tell the difference between, king and kings, right? Or queen and queens, or sword and swords. That's what we mean when we talk about plural nouns. We're talking about things of which there are more than one. Okay, that's what we mean by that. And the feminine and masculine will have different forms of that. Okay, so let's talk about typical characteristics of feminine singular nouns. None of this, this is all going to be covered in your book as well. So part of what I'm doing is I'm reviewing it a bit, and then I'm going to try and give you some helpful hints so that you can navigate successfully these chapters. And keep in mind, all the stuff on these quizzes is fair, or all the stuff on these lectures is fair game, so pay close attention. Okay, the typical characteristics of feminine singular nouns is that they typically end with an ah. Okay, ah. So let's just look at some examples. Actually, let me go through the rules, and then we'll look at the examples. And then they also often end with a tav, not with a tet. Okay, in this case, well, these two t's sound the same, right? The two t sounds, but they are not interchangeable when it comes to nouns. Well, really, when it comes at all, they're not interchangeable at all. They just sound the same. Okay. So usually they end with a comma that's hey, so with the ah, sometimes with the tav. Nouns of cities and countries are almost always feminine. And so it's interesting, let me put it this way, grammatical gender does not always correlate to sex, first of all, or to necessarily even to say that a concept is masculine or feminine. Sometimes that is there, sometimes it's not as convincing. With cities, it often is. With cities, it often is, which is why when you get to books like Second Isaiah, you will see that Zion is referred to names like Bat Zion, which is something like Lady Zion or something like that. And so there are certain words that do have this kind of deep feminine resonance, and in the case of cities, that was due to the fact that cities were often associated with goddesses. Okay, so that's part of the reason why. And then you see this tradition sort of playing out in different ways, even on into the New Testament, into the book of Revelation, where Babylon itself, right, is referred to in feminine terms, in very shocking and disturbing feminine terms. So there are always exceptions, right? We just looked at that. Now here are some examples. I will read these out loud, and then might be good for you to try and read them out loud as well. So this first one is mishpacha, mishpacha. That's a silent shva, right? Because shvas in the middle of the words are typically silent. Mishpacha. This is the word for family. Okay, it's feminine. Notice the chametz hey at the end, right? Chametz hey. Mishpacha. Family. This is a feminine noun. Almost all these are feminine nouns. If there are some that are not, then I will point them out. Na'ara, compared to na'ar, this is the masculine form. This is the feminine form. What's the difference? The fact that on the feminine form you have the ah sound at the end. So na'ara and na'ar. This is the masculine version. This is the feminine version of a young man and a young woman. Now, I want to compare here, just by way of reminder. Oh, sorry, the font is a little bit weird on that Aleph. Let's change it. Well, looks like it's not going to change. Hopefully you can tell that that's an Aleph. Whoops. Oh, here we go. All right. So this is an Aleph. Sorry, I don't know what's going on with the font there. But this is the word ish. And this is the word for a man. Ish. And then this is the feminine word for a woman. This is the word for a woman and is isha. And so you can see there the difference is really just the chametz hey and also the lack of the yod. So you'll see that the yod is not there. But you have ish and isha. The difference being, again, the chametz hey at the end to indicate the feminine noun. Behema. Behema, what kind of shva is this? Well, if it's at the beginning of the word, it has to be what? A vocal shva. You have to say it, or else you're not going to be able to pronounce the word. So, behema, this is a word for beast. It's found in Genesis 1, of course. Notice it ends with the ah. And so this is a feminine noun. This is a noun many of you will know. Torah, or Torah is how we sometimes say it. And that's how you would pronounce it. I think that's how you pronounce it in Yiddish too, is Torah. But for our purposes, we're going to say Torah. And this is the Torah. This is teaching or instruction or something like that. And then eventually it will become HaTorah, right? The Torah, by which Jews are referring to the books of Moses. But they make it definite, right? Ha-Torah, the Torah. Now we're getting on to some examples where the tav is used. Bat. Okay, this is a word for daughter. I actually mentioned this just a few minutes ago when I was talking about Zion, Zion. There's a famous phrase in Isaiah that says Bat Zion, daughter Zion or lady Zion. And that's what this is the word for, is daughter or lady, something like that. So Bat. Or remember, some of you remember the name Bathsheba, right? From the story of Samuel, or David's affair, his seizing and his sexual violation of Bathsheba. Her name in Hebrew is Bathsheba. So her name actually begins with the word bat. Okay. Shana, this is the word for year. So maybe some of you have heard of Rosh Hashanah. Is sometimes how we say it in English. It's Rosh Hashanah. This is the head of the year, the first of the year, important Jewish holiday. But Shana here again, it ends with the common hey, the ah sound. Now Melech, this is not a feminine noun, but I wanted you to see it alongside. So the Melech is king, right? I wanted you to see it alongside Malka, which is, what do you think? What's the feminine version of king? It is the queen. Malka. Again, the schwa here is silent. Malka. You can hear how basically how the syllable ends here after between the lamed and the kaf. Malka, feminine. The word is queen. Just some examples I wanted you to see in person how the feminine nouns differ significantly from the masculine ones in general, right? In general. There are going to be exceptions, of course. But at this early stage in learning Hebrew, we are worried about rules and not exceptions, okay? Focus on rules and not exceptions. I know Dropbox is full. Go away. Okay. Let's just review, okay, typical characteristics of a masculine singular noun. So these are ones that we already know. We've already been learning masculine singular nouns like melech, for example. There are no typical characteristics for masculine singular nouns. If a given noun lacks feminine singular characteristics, then it's probably masculine. For a large percentage of cases, that will work for you. But of course, there are going to be exceptions. But for now, this is what you need to know. If you want to be certain, though, you just have to look up the lexicon, look up the term in lexicon. For example, the holiday lexicon, a concise Hebrew and Aramaic lexicon. You can probably get this for under $20 on Amazon in its physical hardcover form. Really helpful to have. It's not that in-depth. There is a more in-depth version, but it's good enough if you need to determine things like definitions and gender. Okay, let's get on to plural stuff. So we're moving away from king and queen to kings and queens as just an example. Now the way Hebrew is similar to English in that when we in English want to talk about multiple versions of something, what do? We usually add an S to the end, right? So we have cars, we have watches, we have shirts, right? We use that S at the end. And so we add something to the end of the word in order to mark that it is plural, that there are multiple versions. Hebrew is similar in that way, that the way the Hebrew marks something as masculine, feminine, as plural, either masculine or feminine, is by adding endings, okay? So for masculine plural endings, typically end with im, okay, with the word, or with the im right here at the end. And here I even wrote a little transliteration there, im, so that you can remember. Now the feminine plural nouns, they will not end with an im, but rather with an ot. They will end with an ot. So sorry if you hear a bit of noise in the background. It's bathing time right now. And sometimes bathing time is happy time, and sometimes it's not. So masculine plural nouns ending with im, feminine plural nouns ending with ot. Just think about the word in English, because I forgot to give you a transliteration here. Just think about the word in English. Pronounced. Ot. Just like the word, like oat, the food item. Okay. Oops. Let it think, let it think. Okay. Let's do some exercises. And the purpose here is, now that you know the rules, right, for how do you identify feminine singular noun, how do you identify masculine singular noun, how do you identify plural noun, let's just jump in and do some practice. And so what we'll do is I will read the word out loud. You take a minute, and then I'll give you the answer. So you get to practice now even while we're on the video. First one. Ignore these little things on the side are just bullet points. I probably shouldn't have them there, but we'll work with them. Okay, na'ar. Na'ar. Try two things. First of all, try to identify what's that noun, and then try to identify its gender. Right? Think back. What are the markers of masculine? What are the markers of feminine? What are the markers of masculine plural? What are the markers of feminine plural? Na'ar, masculine singular, right? Masculine singular. Let's try the next one. Ne'arim. Ne'arim. Nun, ayin, resh, yod, mem. What do you think? Is it plural or singular, masculine or feminine? In this case, it is masculine plural. And how do you know? It has the markings im, just like here. Im, masculine plural. Maybe the easy way to remember this is that if it has an im ending, it is masculine, right? So if it has that im ending, it is masculine. Ne'arim. Ne'arim. Young men. Na'ara? 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 What could it mean? What could it mean? Okay. Let's go back to our full screen view. Okay, davar. This is a word that all of us have encountered thus far. Davar. So what do you think? Masculine singular? Feminine singular? Masculine plural? Feminine plural? What do you think? It is masculine singular. Notice it has no endings at all. Just the three root letters. Dalet, beit, resh. Davar. It's the word for word or thing. It's masculine singular, doesn't have any doesn't have any im, doesn't have any ot, almost certainly masculine. So now let's look at the next one. Devarim, devarim. Now, obviously related to davar, so this is something related to word, but what do you think? Masculine singular, feminine singular. Masculine plural, feminine plural. It's masculine plural. Look, it has the ending im. So if you have im, it's masculine. Devarim, masculine. So words are things. Na'arot, na'arot, na'arot. Okay, what could it be? Similar root letters, right? Nun, ayin, resh to nun, ayin, resh up here. But what about that ending? What does it tell you? This is feminine plural. Young women. The ot, of course, refers to the feminine plural. That's one of the signature markers in general of feminine plural nouns. Okay? Now, there are of course, exceptions here. And I'm just going to draw attention to one, and when I need you to learn exceptions, then they will be in your vocab list, of course. But there are cases where feminine words will take im endings, just as an example. Let's ish and anashim. This is the word. This is the word for a man, and this is the word for men. Anashim. So this is a strange one in that the plural version actually gains a consonant, right? The nun is not there in the ish, but it gains that nun here. Why? Not entirely certain or necessary for us to go into in detail right here. All that matters is that you learn these. So when you have these exceptions, you just need to memorize them. So ish, anashim. Now, this is ish, this is man, men. This is a woman, isha, right? You have the ah ending, but then look at the plural, nashim. So the feminine plural version of isha, a woman, is nashim. So that's very confusing in a number of ways. First, there's no aleph, it drops off. Second, it has a nun. And third, it has a masculine ending. So what's the best way to learn this? Simply to recognize it as an exception and to memorize it. It is wise when memorizing vocabulary to learn both the singular and the plural forms. Okay, last one. Here's another exception. Av is the word for father, as in the word Avraham. How do you do plural fathers? How would you say fathers? Avot. Avot. So fathers, sorry again, these alepphs are really causing problems tonight. But hopefully you can see that as aleph with the comments. Avot. So a father, fathers. but it has the feminine plural ending. So all of this just to say there are going to be exceptions for sure. I just wanted you to learn the general rules, and then we'll learn the exceptions as we go. You can see some other irregular forms on page 42 through 43. I encourage you to look at those. All right. We're done with verbs for now. We're done with nouns for now. There's always more to learn, and we'll dig more into other forms of the nouns, but for now, that's what we need to know, and that's what you need to master. Let's talk about verbs. You already know a lot about Hebrew verbs. I'm so impressed. Many of you, most of you, can read complete sentences. Now, don't get too ahead of yourselves or too overconfident, because most of those sentences are less than 3 words long. Nonetheless, probably 3 weeks ago, none of you could read any Hebrew sentence at all, so this is impressive and improvement. What do we already know? Every verb must have a subject, right? Amad na'ar. So, see if you can guess it. What is amad na'ar? First, if you're struggling, identify the verb. What do you think the verb is? It is amad, and it means he stood, right? It's in the past tense. I mean, it's a perfect verb, which means it is demonstrates completed action. So na'ar, this is a young man. A young man stood. Okay, so we're going to translate it in the English past tense. Finite, this is something else we know. Finite verbs can be perfect. That is, they can be completed action, like the one above, amad na'ar. And they usually translate those as the English past tense, which we've been doing. And then there are also imperfect verbs. These refer to verbs that have incomplete action, usually translated in the future tense in English. We haven't learned those yet. Don't worry about it for now, but you're going to have to worry about it soon enough. But those are the two forms right now that we're aware of, perfect and imperfect. In Chapter 4, we were also introduced to masculine singular verbs. We've also learned, we've learned in Chapter 4 about third masculine singular perfect verbs. Let's take this apart right here, this 3MS. Third masculine singular. Now, verbs can be divided, the finite verbs can be divided into 3 different persons. We have first, second, and third. First person, the number 1 looks like the letter I, right? First person, I ruled. Let's just use malach, right? I ruled over the class of Hebrew students like a pharaoh. Okay? So that would be an example of I did this. Now, what about second person? 2 is you. 1 is I, and 2 is you, and 3 is he and she. Okay? 1 is I, 2 is you, and third is he, she, and really they. But, for now, don't worry about that. So 1 is I, 2 is you, third is he and she. Okay, that's just my little jingle. I know none of you believe me, but I literally just made that up on the spot. Hopefully it helps you. Let's see if I remember it now. 1 is I, and 2 is you, and 3 is he and she. That's pretty good. Okay, we're talking about third person. He ruled, right? Professor Chan, he ruled over the class like a benevolent pharaoh. Or we could say she, Isabel, our tutor, she ruled over the class like a ruthless queen or something like that, right? Or like a kind queen. I think she's more of the kind queen. But in any case, Isabel ruled, or Professor Chan ruled. How they ruled is your determination. But that's what the third person does. He, she, and it. Okay, so we already know about the third masculine singular. We're going to talk now about third feminine singular verbs and then third common plural. Let me define a couple things. We already know about feminine singular, okay? And third, right? 1 is I, and 2 is you, and 3 is he and she. So third common plural, this is where we're going to learn that third also means they, right? So in my little jingle will be, and 3 is he, she, and they. So common means that it can take subjects that are both masculine and plural. Let's take an example of this from English, okay? In English, we really struggle with if you want to talk to a group of people, right? So sometimes we just say, shorthand, we kind of say you guys, right? And in most cases, people realize that, well, we're not talking about just men here. You guys is a way of talking about a group of people. And part of the reason we have that admittedly awkward formulation is because, unlike our brothers and sisters in the South, those of us who were not raised in the South or who do not speak with Southernisms, don't use the word y'all, right? It's really you all. It's contraction. You all, y'all, is a common plural form, right? It refers to you, plural people. And so we're going to be looking at third common plurals, which is they. This is like the third they. So that's what we're going to work on for the rest of the video. So just a couple little reminder here, or maybe this is new for some of you, but excuse me, let me just take a drink before I dive into this. Every Hebrew verb has a root. It's usually 3 letters. I give you an example here, mem, lamed, chaf. What's interesting about Hebrew is that the whole Hebrew, the language seems to be built off of these 3-letter roots. So from the 3-letter root, mem, lamed, chaf, we get, for instance, the noun malka, which is a feminine noun meaning queen. The masculine noun is melech. But from the same 3 letters, we also get malach, which is the third masculine singular form. He ruled. Okay, the feminine form is malcha. She ruled. And so, but you'll notice there, I use the same 3 roots, whether I'm talking about malka, queen, melech, king, malach, he ruled, malcha, she ruled. All of them use the same 3-letter root, mem, lamed, chaf. Okay. And so it's important to recognize that the Hebrew language system is kind of built off of these 3-letter roots that have kind of core meanings. And then verbs are inflected into either first, second, or third person verbs, right? Again, back to my silly little jingle. 1 is I, 2 is you, 3 is he, she, and they. That's how we inflect finite verbs. We have to, if we're going to use a verb in a sentence, we have to know what the subject is. Is it an I, is it a you, or is it a he, she, it, they? And that's 1 for second and third. And we inflect the verbs, or the scribes, we're not really writing a lot of Hebrew, but the scribes inflected verbs by adding consonants and vowels to that verbal root. So let's look at some examples here. My nice little chart. Perfect verbal form. These are forms that perfect verbal form we already know is the one in purple, and then the others are the forms that we're going to work on this week. So we know this word shama. So, I think we had a sentence earlier last week called Avraham shama. So Abraham heard, and that is because it's Abraham. It's third person masculine. Shama means he heard. Now, what if we wanted to say Sarah heard, right? The great matriarch Sarah, what if we want to say that she heard? Well, then we have to go down here to third feminine, Sham-ah. Remember, shva in the middle of a word is silent. So how do you pronounce these differently? Shama, Sham-ah. Sham-ah. There has to be a pause there. So for the masculine, Avraham Shama. The feminine, Sarah Shama. Say subtle difference, but there is a significant difference there. And since in most cases we're not speaking Hebrew, right? We just need to be able to read it and recognize the difference between Shama, here with the comma te at the end, and Shama without any ending, right? So these are both third singular. This is third masculine, this is third feminine. This is a new form for us. So we could also say Malka Shama, a queen heard. So this is for feminine subjects. Now let's look at the common. Let's shift over to plural. We're working on this common one. So common means that it can be used for both genders. So if we have a group of females, we can use this form. If we have a group of males, we can use this form. If we have a mixed group, we can use this form because it's common to both genders, both grammatical genders. Now here we're using a different root right here. We're using shin mem resh, which is shamar, so to guard something or to protect something or keep it. How do you do the third plural? Shamru. Shamru. Or a little bit easier to pronounce shamru. R's are always hard in foreign languages, and I know that Whether it was learning when I was working on Finnish or working on French or working on Hebrew here or German for that matter, R's are always the hardest, almost always. L's are often pretty hard too. In any case, what marks the third common plural is the U sound at the end. The U sound. So we have shamru, right? Just keep in mind, these are different verbal roots, right? This is from shamar, lishmor, which means to guard. This is heard, all right? So just don't worry about the fact that they have different third endings. Worry about this end right here. The U at the end, because the U is what makes this third common plural, not the resh. The resh is going to be here because it's part of the root, right? If we wanted to do the third common plural of shama, it would simply be shamu. So in any case, so this is how you do the third common plural. It's the U at the end that gives it away. The U at the end is what gives it away. Okay, let's do some practice. Masculine singular perfect or feminine singular perfect. Okay, so we'll just practice for now with singulars. These are verbs, right? Okay, these are not nouns, so shift into verbal mode and out of noun mode. Malach, malach, malach. What do you think? Third masculine singular perfect, he ruled. Okay, let's try this one. Similar but different. Malcha, malcha. Malcha. What is it? Look at that ending. Third feminine singular perfect. She ruled. Halcha. 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 What is it? Feminine or masculine singular verb? Perfect. Third feminine singular, right? Notice that ending. the cha at the end, the a. Zachra. Zachra. Zachra? What do you think? Feminine or masculine singular? Perfect. It's feminine. Look at that ah at the end, right? Halach. This is the counterpart to this word right here. Halcha. Halach. This is, what do you think? Masculine singular perfect, he walked. As opposed to halcha, which is she walked. This is just a little footnote, but an aside. Some of you have heard the term halacha, which is a Jewish legal term. It comes from this root. Halach, it has to do with walking. Okay, amda, 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 amda. Okay, I'm trying to exaggerate the pause here so that you all hear, especially the ending. Amda. This is third feminine singular, right? What would it be if it were third masculine singular? What do you think? Amad. It would look like the halach up here. The vowels would be the same. Oh, there we go. Amad if it were masculine singular, it would be amad, but here it's feminine singular, so amda. Listen for that pause at the shva, the silent shva in the middle of the word. Amda. She stood. Shamar. Shamar. What do you think? Masculine or feminine singular perfect? It's masculine perfect, no ending. If it were feminine, it would have the ah ending. It would say shamra, but it's not. It says shamar. Okay, good job. I know that's a lot of stuff. Here are some things to study on your own. Again, this is open for the quiz. It could be on there. You need to study it. Page 35, the conjunction and, the use of from in Hebrew. This is your first preposition. How exciting. And then a couple more prepositions in 45 through 46. So those are some things that y'all need to study. You all, did you notice my use of the second common plural? That y'all need to study this week. I know the lecture's more dense this week. There's a lot more material. Things are going to pick up. I hope you see why I hammered so hard on the aleph bet, the vowels, and learning just how to pronounce things, because from here on out it's going to look like this stuff, where you're learning multiple grammatical concepts at a time, and at the same time as learning multiple grammatical concepts, you will also be learning vocabulary words, all of which is fair game. If it's in the book, It's fair game for the quiz, so just keep that in mind. Don't, if you did well on the Aleph Beit, if you did well on the transliteration exercise, do not slack at this point. Keep practicing your reading. Get a study partner, right? Attend Queen Isabel's tutoring sessions. Make sure that while you're in the weekly sessions that you have with either me or Isabel, that you are asking the questions that you really have. Don't let intimidation and sort of that fear of looking dumb keep you from asking the question you need to ask. Okay? All right, everyone. Good work this week. I'm excited for this week. We're getting into some deep stuff. So let's keep at it, and I will talk with you soon.